All right, President Biden announced last week that every adult 18 or older in every part of the country will be eligible for a COVID vaccination by no later than April the 19th. But the question has been popping up, how do you know if someone has been vaccinated? Well, the Biden administration, some officials have said there will not be a federal mandate that requires those who are vaccinated to have proof of vaccination or a vaccine passport, as they have been called. And several states are making clear that they won't be mandating them either, especially as some local and state officials, including the Free State of California, are looking into them. With me now is the governor of one of those states that has gone on record saying, no vaccine passports here, Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts. Governor, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much for having me on, Tony. I appreciate it.
Let me ask you, what are your concerns about government vaccine passport programs or requirements?
Well, just on a basic level, any sort of vaccine passport would violate our freedom of movement, our rights to that, certainly violate our privacy with regard to our own health, could be a HIPAA violation. We also got to remember these are emergency use authorizations. So these are still under that emergency use. They haven't gone through the full FDA process, and therefore really need to be a voluntary program because it is emergency use. So I think for a lot of reasons, a vaccine passport program is a terrible idea. It's at least for travel with or anything else within this country. And that's why we said the state of Nebraska would not participate. I wanted to make sure that everybody knew we'd protect their privacy, that if somebody signed up to get a vaccine through the state, that we were going to make sure that their privacy, their information stayed with us. We were not going to share it with anybody because I didn't want that to be a barrier for somebody getting the vaccine. And of course, we certainly would discourage anybody else in the private sector from trying to create a vaccine passport program.
Well, unfortunately, not every state or city that begins with an N is like Nebraska. I guess I'd have to choose between going to Nebraska and New York. I'll be going to Nebraska. New York City Mayor de Blasio says a vaccine passport could be an important part of our recovery and a part of the solution. What do you say to him?
Well, again, I would say that for all the reasons I just outlined, it's a bad idea that you're really restricting people. And I got to tell you, I've also had people come up and tell me and say, hey, I can't get a vaccine because of my particular health conditions. If you've got, for example, an immunocompromised position, you may not be able to get the vaccine. So what are we supposed to tell those folks that actually can't get the vaccine, that you can't participate in whatever activity we want to have a passport for, whether it's getting on an airplane, getting on a train, going into a concert, some sort of event like that? Are we just going to tell those people they're not allowed to participate? Again, I think that that's a wrong answer. The right answer is to educate people on why they should get vaccinated and work on getting that done as broadly as possible. And when we get enough people vaccinated, that's when the virus won't be able to transmit. That's really how we work our way through this pandemic.
Governor, you mentioned this, that you're going to discourage businesses from requiring it. That would de facto a passport requirement to do business with them. What steps might you take in Nebraska to prohibit companies from requiring proof of vaccine to attend a concert, go into a movie hall, or some other type of transaction?
Yeah, it's too late in our legislature to introduce that type of vaccine passport type legislation to prevent that. But one of the things we found is just by coming out ahead of time and setting the expectation, we can really have a big influence. And I'll give you one example. When last summer, the Commissioner of Education and I came out in July saying it was our expectation that our schools in Nebraska would have in-person classrooms in the fall. What we found is that we got a lot of compliance with that. In fact, I saw one study or one report that showed Nebraska was the #2 state for having kids in classrooms, right behind Florida. So I think that, when you set that expectation early on, and we've certainly seen that here in Nebraska, where we've set the expectation that we're not going to support vaccine passports. We've seen now the University of Nebraska, the University of Nebraska football team, our state college system, all say that they're not going to require young people to have vaccines to attend classes next fall.
Governor, you mentioned education. I want to transition here because this was a headline that actually I never thought I would see. It's one that I like. It's a headline that says, Governor Ricketts calls on State Board of Education to scrap politicized sex education standards. What's happening there in Nebraska?
Well, what we had was our State Board of Education, which, by the way, does not report to me. They're a separately elected board. They went out and created these health education standards that included sex education. Now, this is something our legislature has in the past specifically said they are not going to do. The legislature has specifically said they don't have to do this. They don't want them to do it. In fact, it's not required by the State Board of Education to pursue this. And they included political activist groups and left out mainstream groups. They did not, for example, talk to the Catholic Conference, which educates about 10% of our kids in the state. They didn't talk to my chief medical officer. They didn't talk to the Public Board of Health. They didn't talk to any of those folks. And they created these standards that basically sexualize our kids. They're teaching things that are age inappropriate, politically sensitive. Some things should be left to the parents, non-scientific based things. And I'll just give you one example of one of the things they're talking about is teaching seventh graders about anal and oral sex. And I'm sorry, but I don't want my 12-year-old, and my kids are now grown well beyond that, thank goodness, but I wouldn't want my 12-year-old being able to taught that in school. That's just not age appropriate. Right. It's just an example of how they're sexualizing our kids. That really just steps over the bounds. So we've called on them to scrap their standards and called on parents to reach out to our State Board of Education and email them, call them, write them. They had a hearing where the opponents of this vastly outnumbered the proponents of it, and really asked parents to get involved so that the State Board would hear this and really rethink what they're doing.
Governor, 10 seconds, where can parents go to get more information, our listeners in Nebraska?
Sure, www.education.ne.gov. They can find the survey. It's right there on the homepage. They can fill out the survey. I've done it. And they can list their objections right there.
All right. We'll make sure we have a link on our website as well. Governor Pete Ricketts, as always, great to have you on the program, and thanks for what you're doing there in Nebraska.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You have a good one.
All right. You too.